I would like to acknowledge that this video is being filmed on the traditional lands of the Wurrundjeri people of the Kulin Nation. I pay my respects to their elders past and present, and extend that respect to any Aboriginal, Torres Strait Islander or First Nations people who may be watching this video today. Hi everyone, my name is Steph, this is the Novelty Corner and welcome back to my channel. Today I have a Books Beside My Bed video for you, which is where I wrap up the last 7 days worth of reading. This is my reading week from the 3rd until the 9th of July. I read a total of 12 things, 1,340 pages, and my yearly reading total is 329 books. The first thing that I read this week was Black Sun by Rebecca Roanhorse. This is one of the books on my physical TBR that I had to read this month. I really enjoyed this. This is fantasy, and while I am typically no longer a fantasy reader, Rebecca Roanhorse is an author who I will always attempt whatever it is that they're writing. I will probably not be able to do this book justice in explaining what it actually is, but I'm going to try anyway. It is about a young boy whose mother believes that he is to be a god reborn, and in this world there is sort of the religious capital of the world called Tova. And whenever there is a solar eclipse or the black sun, that is seen as a very holy day where magic is at its highest. And this god is foretold to return to Tova at the next black sun. Meanwhile, we meet, I think, Shala, X-I-A-L-A. She is a captain of a ship and she's tasked with bringing a blind, scarred, cloaked man to Tova in time for the solar eclipse. I really liked her character. She was fantastic and I loved her chapters the most. There's a very interesting sort of storyline for her that happens in the book. And she begins to get to know this cloaked man, even though she knows that sometimes the people that are described as harmless are the least harmless people of all. This is a world where magic means power, where there is a ruling class, which is sort of this religious slash scholarly order who have had control for a really long time, but it's really a tentative balance between all these different groups of people. Yeah, like I said, I'm doing a terrible job of explaining this, except to say that Rebecca Roanhorse's writing is very engaging and she got me, a non-fantasy reader, into reading a fantasy book. And I enjoyed it so much that I've actually ordered the next book in the series so that I can keep reading. So hopefully I do not put it off for as long as I put this one off. I will say though, if you are picking this up, content warnings for the very first part of the book where a child is scarred and disfigured very explicitly on page, so be aware of that going into it. All right, then I picked up the next 2 books in the Hidden Legacy series by Ilona Andrews, the Sapphire Flames and Emerald Blaze. The live show for this is the next upcoming weekend. It will be on Izzy's channel. I'll leave it linked down below. You guys have heard me talk about the Hidden Legacy series a lot, and this starts really the second installment in the series where we are now following Catalina Baylor, who is the second oldest sister in the Baylor family. We find out at the start of this book that Catalina is now head of House Baylor. So the world itself is built around these magic houses. When magic was introduced into the world via a serum and people started developing these magic powers, those who had the most magical power eventually had the most political power, and that's what's formed these houses. So Catalina, who is only, I think she's 21 in this book, is suddenly in charge slash the representative of House Baylor, and she is still also running the family investigative agency. We kick off Sapphire Flames when one of Catalina's friends' family is killed in a fire, and she's tasked with helping her friend's brother and her to uncover what happened, despite knowing that this could basically be house warfare and is very likely to get very complicated very quickly and have no good answers. But she dives into it and is forced to work with Alessandro Segredo, who is a wealthy playboy Italian count who she has met once before when he tested her for her magic trials, and she has always had this teenage crush on him. But because of Catalina's powers, she is really reluctant to respond to any flirting on his part because her powers, she's basically a siren. So her magic means that people just love her and want to keep her, and she doesn't trust that he has feelings for her. But oh my gosh, these 2 books, I love Nevada and Connor's books. There's particular things in that I love, but I was reading these and I read Sapphire Flames and I remembered why I always thought that this part of the series was my favorite. I love Catalina and Alessandro so much. They are extraordinarily competent characters. Catalina is very thoughtful in the way that she approaches things, like she thinks things through. She's very analytical. In a similar way, Alessandro is too, in a way where I think Connor and Nevada always react to things, which is not to say that they don't think think things through, but there is a reactionary nature to the way that they behave, whereas I think there is a slightly different dynamic between Catalina and Alessandro, and I love it. This is a world of magic. There are assassins. There is a whole lot of new things that we learn about the world in both these books. I'm not going to talk about Emerald Blaze because it kind of ties in directly to Sapphire Flames, but I just adore this series with all my heart and soul, and I'm so excited for Ruby Fever. I can't wait. I also read Remy by Jessica Gaziella. This was part of my India Chords TBR. This is the 4th book in the Golden Glades Henchman MC series, so it's a motorcycle club romance. So we've met Remy in previous books. He has a tendency to rescue animals and basically has a menagerie back at the clubhouse. And one night he's out and he runs across Lark, who has just rescued a dog from a dogfighting ring. And he's immediately intrigued by her, but they end up going their separate ways. But when Lark goes back to rescue dogs a second time and ends up being caught and assaulted, she ends up remembering that Remy was a member of an MC and goes to track him down and asks for his help. And then the two obviously begin to develop a relationship while also trying to fight for these animals. So if you love animals, aside from the fact that you have a dogfighting ring, none of that is actually on page, but there is a lot of mentions of animals, particularly dogs in this, so if you're an animal lover, you might like this one. Then continuing my India Chords readathon TBR, I read Our Favourite Songs and Wherever Is Your Heart by Anita Kelly. This is book 2 and 3 in the Moonlighters novella series. In Our Favourite Songs, you have Aidan, who is heading out to Mooney's to catch up with his best friend Penelope, and he's waiting in the bar and Penelope hasn't turned up, and then in walks Kai, who he knew in high school but didn't really get along with. Kai is also Penelope's really good friend, and Aidan has this realization that Penelope has invited both of them here to spend the evening with her, but she's still not there. And then they both get this phone call that Penelope has had an accident and is in hospital and won't make it that night. She's okay. She was in I think it was a car accident. Anyway, it's snowing outside and Kai and Aidan decide to finish off their drinks before they leave. But this forces them to spend time together and to confront the things that happened in their past and why their relationship isn't great, because Kai has feelings for Aidan. He finds him very attractive, and Aidan never really thought that Kai was anything other than straight. They end up spending most of the evening at the bar, then they decide to leave. It's snowing really badly outside, and so Kai invites Aidan back to his place because it's closer. And then Aidan ends up spending the night. So this is a snowed in forced proximity situation. I really loved it. And then Wherever Is Your Heart is a sapphic novella which has older heroines, so I think they're both 40 and 50 plus, which I loved seeing. So you have Mal, who is the bartender at Mooney's, and we've met in the previous 2 books, and June. June is a trucker, and she comes to Mooney's because she has this crush on Mal, but she's never had the courage to let her know. Similarly, Mal has developed feelings for June and has never told her. It's Pride. They've got a special event happening at Mooney's, and both of them have come that night hoping that the other will be there, with plans of asking the other out. And it's just so sweet and wholesome. I loved it. I loved June and Mal, and I loved what happened between them. This was the shortest of the 3 novellas, which made me a little bit sad, but it was also the perfect length for the story that was told. I adore this series. Then I finally tried Ali Hazelwood. I read her STEMinist novellas. So there is Under One Roof, Stuck With You, and Below Zero. I'm going to recap all the books, and then I'm going to share some feelings overall about the series. So in Under One Roof, we have Mara, who inherits half of a house from her mentor, and when she turns up at the house she finds that the other owner is currently living there, and so the two are forced to live under the same roof. Mara is an environmental scientist and Liam works as a lawyer for a bio-oil company, so they are quite literally enemies. He doesn't want her there, she doesn't want him there, neither of them are willing to give it up, and they're forced to confront their feelings at some point. The second one is Stuck With You. This one is about Sadie. Sadie had this one night with a guy called Eric who works in the same building as she does, and then the next day she finds out that he works for a rival company. She is an environmental engineer, he works for a rival company, and she believes that he stole some of the ideas that she'd talked about just in conversation with him, because she didn't realize who he worked for and what his position was within the company. So she now hates him, and they end up getting stuck in an elevator, and then they have to confront, exactly what's going on between them. Below Zero was probably the one that I enjoyed most of the 3. This one is about Hannah, who is an aerospace engineer for NASA. She has, just started at NASA. She's got this project in mind, and so she gets a spot on the Arctic research team, and this is despite her boss basically vetoing the idea because he believes it's too dangerous. She still goes out there, she does the experiment, and then she gets stranded and trapped in the middle of a snowstorm, and it's unlikely that anyone is going to be able to come and get her until the next day, which basically forces her boss to come and save her. I have to be really careful because I said I'm vehemently against reading the love hypothesis, and to be honest, these novellas did not sway me in changing my mind about that. I was not a particular fan of Ellie Hazelwood's writing style. I didn't like her heroines because these are very intelligent women, which is great. I love that they are in STEM. I love that they're intelligent. I love that they've got all these things going on. But my God, sometimes the things that they did are absolutely stupid. Their inability to have a conversation. Now, I know that this is a novella in a compressed timeline, but I'm surprised that the heroes actually put up with some of the stuff that happened. And I'm not normally like that with books because I don't mind unlikable heroines or heroes or things like that. You guys know that sometimes I quite like them, but I just couldn't care less about these characters. The writing style wasn't fantastic. Again, that's not always a bad thing, but in terms of wanting to develop an emotional connection to characters and to the story, I just didn't have that. And also, all three of them had this timeline where you're constantly jumping backwards and forwards from the present, trying to build up to what actually caused the conflict that prompts the present day situation. And again, that's not something I dislike, but I would have thought that if you're going to do a novella series, that you might try some different techniques in how you play out the story, because otherwise it feels like you're reading the same thing over and over again. And normally I don't read books when I had this feeling in my head that this is what was going to happen when I started reading the first book. And I don't normally read things or just to say bad things about them, because there was definitely things that I enjoyed. There were some funny one-liners and pop culture references and things that I did like. But for the most part, I don't know. I don't know why this is so popular. Honestly, I found the time jumps really annoying, and I think it prevented, the actual conversation and the connection that you want to see develop between two characters. But that's just my opinion. I will not be reading any more Ellie Hazelwood. I have given it a good 3 goes. And if she writes her other characters the way that she wrote the characters in this book, I couldn't read a whole novel of them because I would throw my Kindle across the room. So unfortunately, that was a bit of a miss. Like, they're not terrible books. They're just not my kind of book. After that, I had to read something that I knew I was going to enjoy, which was Lore Olympus Volume 2. This arrived and I'm so in love with this series and the stories and the characters. In this one, Hera assigns Persephone to working in the underworld with Hades, which of course throws both of them for a loop. And Hades has just found out how young Persephone is and is freaking out about that. And the whole thing is just glorious, sweet, wholesome, and I adore it a lot. I do like that the front of the book does have the content warnings because the series does regularly deal with physical and mental abuse, sexual trauma, and toxic relationships. And I appreciate that that's at the front of this volume. And then I read the first 2 books in the Wild series by K.A. Tucker. I haven't read anything by K.A. Tucker in the past, so I read The Simple Wild and Wild at Heart. So in this book, Kalla's mother left Alaska when Kalla was only 2 years old, and they left behind Kalla's father. And for the first 12 years, Kalla was kind of talking to him on the phone, but then basically they cut off all contact, and so she hasn't seen or spoken to her father in over a decade. But she gets a phone call that lets her know that he has cancer, and it would be a really great idea if she can come out to see him. Now, she's just lost her job, so she really doesn't have anything tying her to Toronto where she lives, and so she reluctantly agrees to go to Alaska to basically meet a man she doesn't know. And their relationship gets off to a fairly rocky start, as well as her relationship with one of her father's best pilots, Jonah. And it takes a little while for all of these relationships to thaw because everyone is in a really stressful situation. And Kalla is a city girl in the middle of nowhere, Alaska. She does not know how to cope. She doesn't have all of the things that she needs because her luggage has gone missing. Jonah thinks that she has absolutely no idea about how to survive anywhere else, and so he keeps needling her about that. And meanwhile, she's trying to build a relationship with her father. But as we get through the story, she's really forced to confront all of those relationships. She's forced to figure out how to connect with her father. She's forced to admit that maybe she feels something for Jonah. And the whole thing was just glorious and immersive and emotional because you do have a parent with a terminal illness. There is the death of a parent, and we sort of get to see the lead up to it, and then we find out that he has passed. So be aware of that going into it if that's a trigger for you. But I really enjoyed it, and I love things set in remote places. I think it adds for a really interesting dynamic, and it really forces characters to confront things head on, and it was great. And then Wild at Heart is the follow-up, so you do get a happy for now at the end of The Simple Wild, so you don't have to read on. But if you continue the next book, we do get to see Kalla and Jonah trying to make a go of their relationship. They've moved to Anchorage. They're trying to build a life together. Kalla is determined to not repeat what happened between her mother and her father, but she's struggling. She is isolated in a place where she doesn't know anyone. She's got like her only companions are people from the town who are trying to, in her mind, force her to behave in a way that is consistent with how everyone else in the town behaves rather than being herself. She's trying to make Jonah happy and she's trying to make herself happy, and it's really stressful for her. And so the two have these really realistic, genuine fights that feel uncomfortable to read, but are also real things, like real issues. So you see that they struggle as a couple. And if I'm going to have a second book about a set of characters who are already together in an established relationship, I want to see the struggle, because that makes me feel invested in their story, because I know that they have things to overcome. I think I liked the second book more, just a tad. Like, I loved both of them, but I think I liked the second one just a little bit more because everything that they went through just felt even more heightened. I do want to say that this book does also mention death of family members, because not only do we have the death of Calla's father, that's still a really big part of Calla and Jonas's life. A lot of the characters that we meet have lost family members in various situations. There's also a character who has a history of being violent against a spouse, which we sort of find out in the last part of the book, so be aware of that going into it. All right, so those are the books that I read this week. It was a fantastic reading week. I'm really sad to be going back to work, so I'm not gonna be able to read as much, but I am looking forward to sharing some more books with you next week. In the comments, I would love to know if you have read any of these books or if you're planning on picking them up. Otherwise, feel free to share something that you have been reading and enjoying. If you want to let me know that you're here but you don't want to leave a comment, leave a blue or green heart down in the comments. Otherwise, I hope that wherever you are in the world, you're staying safe and healthy, and I will see you in my next video. Thanks so much for watching. Bye everyone.